I'm from Abacela in the Umpqua Valley in southern Oregon. Today I'm going to speak to you a few minutes about the new and exciting Iberian varieties of America. As we meet here in San Francisco, a city settled by the Spanish some 235 years ago in the names of Portola and Abacela, it's amazing that they didn't develop a wine industry based on their native grapes.
Here in the U.S., we had the mission grapes coming up too. They first came up with the Jesuit padres that were moving from old Mexico into what became the state of New Mexico and Texas. And they produced wines there called Paso that was quite famous on the early frontier. About 100 years later, the Franciscan Abacela and Portola came up the west coast and brought the mission grapes, which were planted along the various mission sites. And so that's how they got here. There was also a Spanish trail connecting Santa Fe and the Pueblo of Los Angeles. I guess it's outgrown that name by now. The American Creole is just like the ones in South America, lost ground to the more valued varieties. Early on, during the time of early Mexican control of Alta California, Jean-Louis Vignes planted a lot of French grapes in the LA area. These grapes is what established the Anaheim industry that later on was extinguished by Pierce's disease. In 1880, by that date, California had been a state by, I guess, about 21 years, something like that at that time. The more fashionable varieties from Cabernet to Zinfandel were taking over, and the missions were fading. But they never went away, as you know, and there's still some very good wines that can be made from the mission grapes. Tempranillo made a late entry here in 1888. Remember, it didn't come with the Spanish. It came when the people from Berkeley brought Tempranillo in to an agricultural experimental station down in Jackson. Violetti, by another 20 years later, had understood that Tempranillo could be a workhorse grape. It would grow well in the warm climate of the South Central Valley. It produced good bulk wine, and an industry developed that was focused around that grape being used in that manner. 100 years later, the status quo for Tempranillo in the USA was still that. There was 533 acres, according to the National Ag Stats, planted in the Central Valley of California. The fruit was utilized for jug wine or distillation purposes. There was no vintage dated variety labeled Tempranillo produced in the U.S. Okay, moving right along here, let's compare this to Spain just a bit. The industry model in Spain for bulk wine was centered in La Mancha and to some degree on the eastern areas from that, like Valencia. And this year would be debatable. It might even be earlier than that. In the U.S., through Violetti's work and others, it became a good industry in the Central Valley. Fine wine in Spain emerged in the early 1800s. By 1850, it was pretty well established in Rioja and beginning to be established in Ribera. In the U.S., that didn't happen until the 1990s. That's pretty shocking. Let's talk about what kindled that interest and what made it happen. It was the golden age of Spanish food and wine, and that's my term. It began when Tories made successful Cabernet-based wines that had a little Tempranillo in them in the early days. He entered them in the Paris Olympiad and won, beating Chateau Latour with a big brawny wine. 1986, Parker said that the 82 Pescara was close to Chateau Petrus. Elegance. Ferran Adria establishes El Bulli, and El Bulli goes ahead to change the world of cuisine. That golden age flourished, pre-rot, and you could just keep adding new districts that are growing their old grapes in better ways. But it came across the Atlantic. People in this country began to aspire to make a fine Tempranillo. We were changing our model. Let's run quickly through that. the first Tempranillo, according to the National Ag Stats, planted in California outside the Central Valley was in 1992 in Napa. In 1995, Tempranillo was being planted for the first time in the Pacific Northwest. In 2001, an American Tempranillo won in an international wine competition over 19 Spanish Tempranillos. First time in history. In 2006, an American Tempranillo took a gold in the Tempranillo Al Mundo competition, which is Spain's own. That's some validation that the New World growers of that grape are doing it okay. Today, you're going to taste some of these. This is our organization. We have 178 members. Tempranillo is the most widely grown red out of this group. As a statement of how popular it is, UC Davis now has 19 cultivars of that grape. Albarino is the most widely planted of these whites, and you're going to be tasting that. As I try to pull this to a conclusion, I want to show you that most of the Tempranillo producers are located in California. The second largest group is in Oregon, then Washington, Texas, and Arizona. But let's don't forget Ontario, Canada. Now, TAPAS is creating something special. We're making a new Spanish trail, and it doesn't lead from Los Angeles to Albuquerque to Santa Fe. It's going to lead all over these areas. Now let me summarize again. I've said this fairly quickly, so now to summarize it should be pretty straightforward. It took 400 years from Columbus's ships coming ashore until we had Tempranillo. Then it took another 100 years before we knew what to do with it to make a fine wine. We've now been at that 17 years. And along with 30 other grapes, you know, the results have been pretty good. You're going to be able to confirm that with your own palate today. Judges have confirmed that our wines really have typicity. That's terribly important when you make a wine. You know that. And they've also said that they're really good. They're good as Spain's finest wines. Yet, I don't think that that's what TAPAS is all about. I don't think we're out there simply merely making wines to imitate the mother country. I think we're going beyond that. I think we're crafting original New World wines, not so different, if you would, than what happened with some of the famous grapes. That obscure little grape from Croatia that came to California and became Zen. How about Cot that went to Argentina and became Malbec? And look what, in our lifetime, in the last 20 years, 30 years, that's happened to Sauvignon Blanc in New Zealand. I think there's a lot going on here in this sea of 600 Iberian varieties, and you're going to get an inkling of what that is today.